For centuries, the city of Rome has been the capital of the greatest empire ever created. The city has been a beacon of power and culture, its ancient streets whispering stories of empires and legends, through battles, alliances, and betrayals that determined the rise and fall of kingdoms and empires. But let's start from the beginning. The entire history of Rome. In the mists of ancient lore, Romulus and Remus, twin brothers nurtured by a she-wolf, rise to shape a destiny no one could foresee. The echoes of their story reverberate through time as a small, unassuming settlement embarks on an extraordinary journey. Rome's legendary beginnings laid the groundwork for a sequence of actions that would permanently change the path of history. The myth of the founding of Rome does not begin with the twins Romulus and Remus being suckled by a she-wolf, but with Aeneas, one of the heroes of the Trojan War, whose actions were later sung about by the Roman author Virgil in his poem The Aeneid. In the 12th century BC, legend has it that the Trojan, fleeing his city devastated by the Greeks, came to settle after an adventurous journey through Sicily and Carthage on the banks of the Tiber. There, he married Lavinia, the daughter of a king named Latinus. In honor of his father-in-law, Aeneas gives his people the name Latins. 4 centuries later, a succession conflict between two of his descendants, the brothers Numitor and Amulius, raged. The latter dethrones Numitor and, to avoid the danger of having descendants, forces the daughter of his rival, Rhea Silvia, to enter the order of the Vestal Virgins dedicated to celibacy and chastity. This was without counting on the god Mars, who, in love with the young girl, united with her and gave her twins, the future Romulus and Remus. Amulius decided to throw the children into the flooded waters of the Tiber. The flow places their wicker cradle at the foot of the Palatine Hill, breastfed by a she-wolf in a cave. The Lupercal, the newborns are collected by a couple of shepherds. As teenagers, they overthrew the usurper, Amulius, and restored their grandfather Numitor to the throne of Latium. Then, they left to find a city on the site of the Palatine, where they were miraculously saved and designated in 753 BC. By a sign from heaven as founder and king of this place, Romulus traces with the plow the furrow marking the enclosure of the city, but must face the jealousy of his brother. Remus, out of bravado, crosses this sacred limit. Moreover, Romulus kills him. The earliest city of Lazio, a region in west-central Italy that the Latins originally inhabited, was Alba Longa, also known as Alba the Long. This is where the narrative of Rome's birth starts. This may explain why Aeneas, a Trojan prince, is claimed to have founded it around 1150 BCE. Agricultural groups have lived here since the Bronze Age, and it was known to the ancient Greeks. According to legend, the brothers Amulius and Numitor, 2 descendants of Aeneas, fought for the throne of Alba Longa. Amulius triumphed, killed Numitor's sons, and exiled his daughter, Rhea Silvia, giving her the role of a virginal virgin to deprive her of all descendants. Thanks to divine intervention, however, she gave birth to 2 twins, Romulus and Remus. Threatened by these potential claimants to the throne, Amulius had Rhea Silvia beheaded and the babies thrown into the Tiber. By a miracle, a she-wolf rescued and cared for the boys until a shepherd, Faustulus, adopted them and raised them on Palatine Hill in present-day Rome. The brothers then established the city of Rome on the banks of the Tiber, in an area narrow enough to be crossed and with hills, giving them a good defensive position. On the other hand, the land between the hills was quite marshy and not very fertile. The twins soon began to argue, disagreeing over the exact boundaries of the city, and Romulus killed Remus. With the outlaws and criminals he had recruited, Romulus organized a party, invited the neighboring tribe of the Sabines, who refused attempts at marriage with the Romans, and took advantage of the opportunity to kidnap the young Sabines. According to legend, the role of Roman wives suited them, and when the men of their original people came to reclaim them, they prevented them from fighting against the Romans. The Sabines ultimately remained in Rome and became integral to the new city. Legend has it that Ascanius, son of the Trojan hero Aeneas, founded the city of Alba Longa on the right bank of the Tiber. Many of his descendants ruled there until Numitor and his brother Amulius arrived. The latter dethroned Numitor, and so that there would be no descendants who could steal the throne from him, he condemned his daughter, Rhea Silvia, to be a priestess of the god Vesta so that she remained a virgin. Despite this, Rhea Silvia gave birth to twins Romulus and Remus, fathered by Mars, the god of war. When they were born, to be saved, the brothers were thrown into the Tiber and placed in a basket that washed up near the area of the 7 hills near the Tiber's mouth. A she-wolf, Luperca, came near the river to drink. She collected and nursed them in her den on Palatine Hill until they were found and rescued by a priest who would have them raised by his wife. As adults, the twins will restore their grandfather Numitor to the throne of Alba the Longhand and find a city on the right bank of the Tiber, where they were suckled by the she-wolf to become kings there finally. It is said that the she-wolf who nursed Romulus and Remus was their human adoptive mother. The term she-wolf in Latin lupa was also used pejoratively to designate prostitutes of the time. Legend also tells how Romulus killed Remus. Near the Tiber's mouth were 7 hills: the Aventine, Caelius, Capitoline, Esquiline, Palatine, Quirinal, and Viminal hills. Romulus and Remus disagreed on where the city should be founded, so they decided to observe the flight of birds in the Etruscan manner. Romulus saw 12 vultures flying over the Palatine, and Remus only saw 6 from other hills. To demarcate the new city, Romulus drew an enclosure, dug by a plow at the top of the Palatine Hill, and swore to kill anyone crossing it. Remus disobeyed and went inside, mocking his brother, who, angry, killed his brother and was the first and only king of Rome. This event would have taken place in the year 754 BC, according to the version of the official history of ancient Rome. According to other ancient sources, the city's founding would have a link with the Greek world since the founders had Trojan ancestry. This legend presents Aeneas, the Trojan prince, as one of the direct ancestors of Romulus and Remus, who also became king after marrying the daughter of the Latin king. This interpretation is found in more than just the theories of Greek historians. It is also defended in the Italic world, compared to other myths that attribute its origin to Arcadius or Achaeus. Regardless, Greek historiography has attributed divine and Greek origins to the founding of Rome. However, the Trojan origin of Rome is difficult to accept if we compare the date of Troy's destruction in 1200 BC with the archaeological remains of the villages of Latium and Septimontium. The enigmatic reigns of Rome's legendary kings unfold, each ruler leaving a mark on the nascent city. From the mysterious Romulus to the tyrannical Tarquin the Proud, their stories are steeped in ambition, betrayal, and the relentless pursuit of power. Early Rome evolves under monarchic rule, laying the groundwork for a future republic amid regal intrigue and foundational strife. The 7 Kings of Rome. Rome was founded by the mythical Romulus, who also served as its first monarch. Romulus started constructing the city above the Palatine Hill in 753 BCE. As the legend goes, after creating and naming Rome, he freely welcomed persons of all social levels to become citizens, including free and enslaved individuals. Romulus called the surrounding tribes to a feast in Rome in order to furnish his citizen spouses, and while there, he kidnapped the young ladies, known as the Rape of the Sabine Ladies. Following the conflict with the Sabines, Romulus and Titus Tatius, the Sabine king, shared the throne. The Roman Senate was established by Romulus as the king's advisory council and consisted of 100 noblemen. The term patres refers to these males, and the people descended from them became patricians. He established voting and class structures defining socio-political proceedings throughout the Roman Republic and Empire. Romulus is the first of these kings. Son of Mars and Rhea Silvia, he and his twin brother Remus trace the city's path before fighting to determine who will be king. Romulus kills Remus, proclaims himself king, and gives his name to the city. On April 21st, 753 BC, Rome was established. He established an asylum to attract inmates, then flocks of brigantines and shepherds. Then, during the games in honor of Neptune, the consulate, he ordered the abduction of the wives of the Sabines, a neighboring nation, because he lacked women to guarantee the descendants of the first Romans. Moreover, the Romans and the Sabines engaged in combat. Romulus and Tatius, the Sabine king, signed a peace pact, and the Sabines were allowed to enter Rome due to their involvement. Romulus chose 100 older men to advise him, and thus formed the Senate. While conducting a census of the army near the Goat Marsh, he disappeared during a storm. Since then, the Romans had considered him a god and worshipped him under the name Quirinus. Numa Pompilius, a virtuous and just Sabine, is chosen to succeed Romulus as king. Instead of being established on violence and weaponry, he wants Rome to be based on justice, the rule of law, and the inviolability of its morality. Additionally, he constructed the Janus Temple at the base of the Argolet to appease the city. In this temple, he installs doors that, when closed, represent peace and, when open, signify conflict. In addition to establishing good and bad days, he creates a 12-month calendar. Numa organizes religious life by creating 3 flamines dedicated respectively to Jupiter, Mars, and Quirinus, 12 Salian priests dedicated to Mars, and the College of the Vestal Virgins. He also appoints a high pontiff responsible for organizing religious ceremonies. He instituted numerous laws that his wife, the nymph Egeria, would have dictated to him during their nocturnal meetings in a wood crossed by a fountain whose inexhaustible waters flowed from a cave. He managed to maintain peace throughout his reign before dying of illness, leaving Egeria inconsolable. Tullus Hostilius was a Latin who was elected king by the Roman people. The Senate then ratifies the election. This third king, unlike Numa Pompilius, is of an even more warlike nature than Romulus. All pretexts seemed good to him to wage war, so much so that he led the Roman people into war against Alba, despite the historical proximity between the two cities. Indeed, Alba, founded by the son of Aeneas, Iulius Ascanius, saw the birth of Romulus. Faced with the Etruscan threat, Tullus Hostilius and the king of Alba, Medius Fufetius chose the 3 best soldiers from each camp, so as not to weaken their respective armies through deadly battles. The Horus brothers, triplets, fight in the name of Rome. The Curiatae, also triplets, in the name of Alba. During a famous fight, 2 Horatii died, while the Curiatae were all 3 wounded. The surviving Horus pretends to flee to face each Curiatae in single combat, whom he kills. The Albans then came under Roman domination. However, during a war against the Veians, Medius Fufetius betrayed the Romans. Tullus Hostilius then quartered him and ordered the destruction of Alba. He died struck by lightning and consumed in his palace. The 4th king of Rome, elected by the Roman people and Senate, was Ancus Martius, grandson of Numa Pompilius. He, too, is known for his temperance but is nevertheless forced into war by his Latin enemies. Also, like his grandfather, who founded religious institutions for times of peace, he created them for times of war. He sends an ambassador called Fecial to his enemies, who, with a veiled head, demands reparation from the Latin enemies. This does not give him satisfaction. The facial throws a javelin towards them as a sign of declaration of war. The Romans finally prevailed over the Latins, who were integrated into the Roman people and transferred to the Aventine. As the Roman population increased significantly, he built a wall around the city and a wooden bridge, the Sublicius Bridge, the first ever built on the Tiber. The large number of inhabitants brings an increase in crime, leading him to build a prison that dominates the Forum in the center of the city. He also founded the port of Ostia at the mouth of the Tiber. Ancus Martius died prematurely after 24 years of reign. Tarquin the Elder, of Etruscan origin, was the fifth king of Rome. Before taking the name Tarquin, he was called Lucumon and driven by ambition. He left his Etruscan city to immigrate to Rome with his wife Tanaquil and all his fortune. As they approach the Janiculum in their chariot, an eagle removes Lucumon's cap and then replaces it on his head. Tanaquil, skilled in divination, sees it as a happy omen and a sign that her husband will become king. He took the name Lucius Tarquinius Priscus and gradually gained influence in Rome to such an extent that Ancus Martius ended up naming him the guardian of his children in his will. When Ancus died, he alienated his sons, openly sought kingship, and was elected king. He led the first war against the Latins, and with the lute, he built the Circus Maxime. Then, he won a war against the Sabines. Once peace was concluded, he undertook major works. He fortified the city by building a wall and cleaned it up by creating a sewer network, the Cloaca Maxima. He takes under his protection Servius Tullius, a child born, according to rumor, to a noble but enslaved person's mother before marrying him to her daughter, which greatly displeases the two sons of Ancus, indignant at having been removed from the throne. Servius Tullius, protege of Tarquin the Elder, was the sixth king of Rome. He took power on the death of his predecessor, who was appointed by the Senate, without, for the first time, having been elected by the people. He married his two daughters, Tullia, to the two sons of Tarquin the Elder, Lucius and Arens. He fought courageously against the Veians, but the great work of his reign was the centuriated organization to recruit the army. It distributes the entire population according to a census system into 5 classes, each divided into a variable number of centuries. Everyone now must provide for the needs of the state in proportion to their income. He also divides the city into 4 districts and ensures beautification. He thus decided to build a temple of Diana, modeled on that of Artemis of Ephesus. One of his daughters, Tullia, with a fierce character, was initially married to Arens Tarquin, who had a gentle character. His other daughter, who had a docile character, was married to Lucius Tarquin with a touchy character. However, the fierce Tullia eventually marries Lucius Tarquin after the timely deaths of her sister and her husband. Shortly afterward, pushed by his wife, Lucius Tarquin sat in place of Servius Tullius before the Senate claimed his father's throne. Informed of this, Servius Tullius went to the Senate. The two men argue, and Tarquin throws Servius Tullius from the top of the steps and has him assassinated. Tullia, returning home in her chariot, drives over her father's corpse in the street later named the Street of Crime. This is how the sixth king of Rome perished after 44 years of reign. Tarquinius Superbus is the 7th and last king of Rome. When his father-in-law died, his refusal to bury him earned him his nickname, and he took possession of power without hesitation. Surrounding himself with guards, he reigned through terror without worrying about the people's votes or the Senate's consent. He reduced the number of senators and governed alone. He had his opponent, the Latin Turnus Herdonius, killed to set an example. Warrior King waged war on the Volscians and then on the city of Gabes, which he subdued thanks to the cunning and stratagem of his son Sextus. He continued the development of Rome by building the Temple of Jupiter on Mount Tarpeian. He wants the location of the capital to be entirely dedicated to Jupiter. He also built galleries around the Cirque Maxime and a sewer intended to receive the city's waste. However, while Tarquinius Superbus is laying siege to Ardea, his son Sextus rapes the virtuous Lucretia, wife of Collatinus, the king's nephew. Lucretia explains her misfortune to her father and her husband before committing suicide out of shame and despair. Brutus, close to Collatinus, swears to avenge Lucretia. Brutus harangues the Roman people who pronounce the forfeiture and exile of Tarquinius Superbus, his wife, and his children. Warned, Tarquin tries to return from Ardea to Rome but finds the doors closed. His exile is thus signified to him. His is how his 25-year reign ended in 509 BC. Brutus and Collatinus became consuls, marking the end of royalty and the beginning of the Republic. Out of the ashes of monarchy, the Roman Republic emerges. A tale of democracy shadowed by ambition and civil war. Figures like Julius Caesar rise and fall, reshaping an entire civilization. The Republic's narrative is one of resilience and transformation, as Rome grapples with the challenges of governance and conquest, teetering on the brink of imperial rule. Lucius Junius Brutus, a Tarquinian prince, was the first consul or praetor maximus of the Roman Republic in 509 BC. He toppled the last Etruscan ruler, Tarquinius Superbus, and played a significant part in the king's deportation. Brutus, the son of Tarquinia, was nicknamed Brutus for his imbecilic behavior. When King Tarquinius sent his sons to the Oracle of Delphi, Brutus accompanied them and interpreted the oracle as referring to the common mother of all people, the earth. Brutus avenged Lucretia, the wife of Lucius Tarquinius Collatinus, who had raped her. He then stabbed herself, forming the first Roman consul couple in 509 BC. The Tarquinians persuaded Brutus's sons, Titus and Tiberius, to conspire to restore the kingship, but the plot was discovered, and Brutus was executed. Brutus later fell in a duel against Aruns, the exiled king's son. Current research assumes that the consulship was introduced much later, with the highest office being probably initially the praetor maximus. Brutus was elected consul simultaneously as Lucretia's husband, Lucius Tarquinius Collatinus, in 509 BC. The first thing he does is get his co-consul Lucius's approval that he, Brutus, should become consul mayor, that is, executive consul, in the first month. As such, he had the right to execute or cause to be executed all decisions through the lictors, who carried fasces in front of them as a sign of the executive power they exercised. The first thing he did was to make the Senate swear to never tolerate any king in Rome. Then, to give the Senate more strength, he admitted new members drawn from the noble knighthood so that the members of the Senate again numbered 300. The former members were designated patra, the new conscripti, newly elected. His time as consul has been smooth. Some of the Tarquin's friends missed the freedom and debauchery and felt that equality rules had limited their power. They received letters from Lucius Tarquinius Superbus and planned to receive him and his family in Rome secretly. Among those who joined were Vitellius, brother of Brutus's wife, and Brutus's two sons with her, Titus and Tiberius. After the plot was revealed through an awake enslaved person. Most of the participants in the plot, with the help of Publius Valerius Publicola, were taken prisoner, among them Titus and Tiberius. They were all condemned to death, and after the consuls had taken their seats, the lictors were sent to execute the death penalty. The criminals were stripped naked, given whips, and beheaded. Meanwhile, all eyes were on the father. You could see what he felt as a father during what he punished as an official. The enslaved person received freedom and citizenship in addition to a monetary gift. He is said to be the first enslaved person to be freed. It is believed that the rod of liberation, Vindicta, was named after the freedman, who is said to have been Vindictus. Brutus then got his co-consul Collatinus to resign as consul and move from Rome. Brutus then caused the Senate to decree that the Tarquin family should be declared exiles. Subsequently, Publius Valerius Publicola was elected consul as thanks for helping to overthrow the autocracy. Carthage, a wealthy ancient civilization, dominated the Mediterranean against Greece and Rome, with commercial enterprises and influence stretching from Spain to Turkey. Despite preferring economic pressure and influence, Carthage produced several outstanding generals, including Hannibal, who came close to bringing Rome to its knees before the city's fall. Hannibal's military campaign in Italy during the Second Punic War is considered one of the greatest generals in history. However, much of his background is unknown, as most of what is known about Hannibal came from the people he tormented in the late 2nd century BCE. Scipio Africanus, another outstanding military leader, is usually recognized as one of the finest. In less than 10 years, he took Rome from near destruction to becoming the dominant power in the Mediterranean. However, Scipio was less able to deal with the envy and political machinations of the Roman Senate and ended his life in bitter, self-imposed retirement. Both men left legacies of military genius, catastrophic defeats, perseverance in the face of setbacks, and astounding victories. One of the greatest historical civilizations was Carthage. At its height, the prosperous Carthaginian Empire ruled the Mediterranean against powers like Greece and Rome, with trade routes extending from Spain to Turkey. It had the potential to usurp the Greek city-states or the nascent Roman Empire as the Mediterranean's dominant force. Despite Carthage's preference for economic pressure and influence over direct military force, relying heavily on mercenary armies funded by its wealth, the city-state produced several exceptional generals, ranging from Hanno Magnus to Hannibal, the legendary Roman nightmare. Though Hannibal ranks among the greatest generals in history, much mystery surrounds Carthaginian mythology, adding to its aura and mystique. A large portion of Hannibal's past is unknown because most of what is known about him comes from the Romans, as Carthage was destroyed by Rome a decade after Hannibal's time. Military historians remain perplexed by some of his choices, such as why he never attempted to march on Rome, despite keeping his army in Italy close to Rome for almost 15 years. Publius Cornelius Scipio, known as Scipio Africanus, is considered one of the greatest military leaders of all time, though he is less well known than Hannibal. Scipio turned Rome from the verge of total annihilation to the leading force in the Mediterranean in less than 10 years. In addition to his keen awareness of battlefield tactics, he had a strategic vision that regularly enabled him to confuse his adversaries. Scipio's campaigns are examples of great strategy in history, earning him the title, the embodiment of grand strategy. Like Hannibal, Scipio concluded his life in bitter, self-imposed retirement, unable to handle the jealousy and political maneuvering of the Roman Senate. Both men left behind records of military prowess, crushing losses, tenacity in the face of adversity, and incredible triumphs. Their tales also frequently feature internalized resentment, jealousy, and ingratitude. The Punic Wars, a sequence of battles between the Roman Republic and the Carthaginian Empire, ended in 202 BC with the Battle of Zama. Publius Cornelius Scipio led the Roman Republic, while Hannibal Barca led Carthage. As the leader of Roman armies, Scipio was regarded as the greatest military strategist in history, having never lost a single fight. He was the first Roman commander to extend Roman rule over the islands around the Italian mainland and beyond Italy. Rome initially took over the Carthaginian region of Iberia under Scipio. Thanks to Scipio's victory over Hannibal at Zama, Rome eventually destroyed Carthage in 146 BC. The most significant outcome of the Second Punic War was Rome's eventual conquest of the Mediterranean region. Hannibal Barca, the son of the principal Carthaginian commander during the First Punic War with Rome, led a Carthaginian force, including several war elephants, from the Carthaginian-controlled Iberian Peninsula across the Pyrenees into Gaul, across the Alps, and into Italy at the start of the Second Punic War. In three notable battles, at Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and most notably, Cannae, he triumphed over larger Roman forces. The Battle of Trebia marked the beginning of young Scipio's military maturity process, and a tragedy for Rome. Scipio and Hannibal rank among history's most creative and well-known military leaders. Roman history was significantly impacted by the Punic Wars. At Cannae, Hannibal Barca defeated the Romans by encircling and eliminating most of their forces. Between 50,000 and 70,000 Romans were slain or taken prisoner in this disastrous setback. It was one of the deadliest battles in human history, and one of ancient Rome's most disastrous defeats. Hannibal was compelled to return to Carthage to defend the city during the Second Battle, a Roman counter-invasion of North Africa. At the Battle of Zama, 204 BC, Scipio Africanus decisively beat Hannibal after studying his strategies. As a result of Scipio's military reputation and maneuvers, Hannibal was finally defeated at Zama. Military institutions worldwide still study Hannibal's accomplishments, particularly his triumph at Cannae. The Schlieffen Plan was formulated in 1905-1906 by German General Count Alfred von Schlieffen, who studied Hannibal's envelopment tactics at Cannae. Theodore Aralt Dodge, a military historian, commended Hannibal for being a superb strategist who possessed superior logistics and strategic acumen. Greek historian Polybius wrote a history of the epic battle between Hannibal and Scipio, which took place between 264 and 146 BC. The 53 years that ancient Rome rose to prominence as a global force were chronicled in Polybius's The Histories, which included the sack of Carthage in 146 BC. While most people know Hannibal Barca's adventures, only a few know the Roman general Publius Cornelius Scipio Africanus, who fought Hannibal and spread Roman influence over the Mediterranean. After Tiberius Gracchus was elected as a plebeian tribune in 134 BC, he became especially concerned about treating impoverished peasants and enslaved people whose property had been taken by the Roman nobles while abroad on war operations. As part of his planned agricultural reform, which would have limited land ownership to 125 hectares per person or 250 hectares per family, the poorest Romans would get the freed-up land, typically at no cost. Gaius Gracchus, Tiberius's brother, was one of the triumvirate members tasked with implementing the law. However, the Roman senators perceived it as dangerous to their authority to assign property and fortunes. In 133 BC, Tiberius was killed. After his brother's reforms were carried out, Gaius Gracchus was chosen as a tribune in 123 BC. Along with his plans to establish colonies in Carthage and Italy, he issued an edict for the distribution of low-cost bushels of wheat to the Roman people. The Senate ordered his execution. However, the exact circumstances are still unknown. The first triumvirate was a political coalition of Julius Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus aimed at increasing their influence within the Roman Republic. However, the alliance fell apart after Crassus died in 53 BCE due to increasing competition between Caesar and Pompey. This led to Julius Caesar's ascent to power and the fall of the Roman Republic. Caesar's military expeditions, known as the Gallic Wars between 58 and 50 BCE, significantly elevated Caesar's stature and influence. The Battle of Alesia in 52 BCE is a famous example. Caesar's invasions of Britain in 55 and 54 BCE expanded Roman dominance on the island and opened the stage for future Roman authority in Britain. In 49 BCE, Caesar declared war on the Roman Republic, flouting the Senate's will. This led to a civil war between Caesar and soldiers loyal to the Senate, led by Pompey the Great. The Roman Republic ended during Caesar's civil war, lasting from 49 to 45 BCE. Caesar, who declared himself dictator for life in 44 BCE, became the first emperor of Rome and initiated important changes that had a lasting impact on Roman administration and culture. Brutus and Cassius, Roman senators, plotted Julius Caesar's assassination on March 15, 44 BCE to save the Republic from despotism. Caesar was killed 23 times at the theater of Pompey during a Senate meeting. The assassination did not restore the Republic, leading to civil wars and power struggles in Rome. The murderer's intentions were not fulfilled, and the populace's dislike of the senators for the killing led to the rise of Augustus Caesar, Caesar's adopted son and grandnephew. During Augustus's reign, the Roman Republic ended, and the Roman Empire came into being. The sad event that occurred at this time signaled the beginning of the Roman Empire and the end of the Roman Republic itself. Augustus ushers in an era of emperors where Rome reaches unparalleled heights of glory and decadence. The empire's story is one of magnificent expansion and eventual decline, marked by intrigue, betrayal, and the relentless march of time. The grandeur of Rome masks the cracks that will lead to its dramatic fall, leaving a legacy that echoes through the ages. Augustus, born Gaius Octavius Thurinus in 63 BC, was a Roman Republic leader known for his numerous titles and honorifics. He served as both a governor and senator. At 16, Octavius took on responsibility through his family's connections and traveled to Hispania in 47 BC to battle Caesar. He chose an uncomfortable partnership with Caesar over an all-out pursuit of Antony following Caesar's death. Rome's lands were divided among the Second Triumvirate, founded in 43 BC by Octavian, Antony, and Marcus Aemilius Lepidus. Augustus began his reign in 31 BC or 27 BC, annexing lands in Europe and Asia Minor and forging alliances that allowed him to govern from Britain to India effectively. He rebuilt Rome, added to the Roman road system, and established the Praetorian Guard. After Augustus Caesar died in 14 AD, Tiberius was named the official leader of the Roman religion. Tiberius's brother Drusus invaded Germany, where he died in 9 BCE, and reduced Pannonia to the middle Danube. Tiberius was forced to adopt Germanicus, the brother of Drusus, when Augustus took him in as his son. Tiberius faced the challenge of uniting Germany's invading forces and provincial structure. The conquest of Bohemia and Western Germany was put off indefinitely due to Augustus's inability to replenish the troops quickly. Germanicus and Tiberius were dispatched to unite the Rhine border. Augustus's tenure was distinguished by innovative administrative practices, including the annexation of Judea in 6 CE, the creation of a military treasury, the conversion of the city's prefect into a permanent office, and the creation of a fire brigade with police duties. Pax Romana was a condition of comparative serenity across classical antiquity and the Mediterranean globe from the era of Augustus to the reign of Marcus Aurelius. Augustus created the basis for this age of unparalleled concord, extending to North Africa and Persia. The empire protected and managed separate provinces, enabling each to create and administer its laws while accepting Roman taxes and military authority. Emperor Nero was known for persecuting Christians and involvement in the Great Fire of Rome in 64 CE. The fire destroyed Rome, leaving only 4 of its 14 districts untouched. Nero blamed Christians for the fire, leading to their widespread persecution and execution. Domus Aurea's palace was a sprawling complex of gold leaf marble and frescoes featuring an artificial lake, gardens, and a statue of Nero. Funded by military wars and confiscated property, Nero's mansion testified to his excess and self-indulgence. Despite his appreciation for the arts, his tenure is regarded as one of oppression and extravagance, culminating in extensive persecution and murder of Christians. Trajan, Emperor of Rome from 98 to 117 CE, expanded the Roman Empire to its greatest extent, encompassing modern-day Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. His military campaigns included conquests of the Nabatean Kingdom, Dacia, and Parthia, bringing immense wealth to the empire. Trajan funded public works like the Forum of Trajan and Trajan's Column. Despite his military aggression, Trajan was known for his benevolent rule and commitment to the welfare of his subjects. He implemented social programs like the Alimenta, a state-sponsored welfare system for orphaned and impoverished children. Trajan's reign is remembered as a golden age of Roman history, marked by military success, prosperity, and good governance. Emperor Hadrian reigned for 20 years and was known for securing the Roman Empire's boundaries and redirecting focus from development to consolidation. He felt the empire had attained its ideal size and that additional conquests would undermine it. Hadrian's Wall, a gigantic defensive construction, defended Roman Britain against northern tribal assaults. In addition to military and administrative triumphs, Hadrian, a patron of the arts and Greek culture, ordered major architectural projects. His reign was distinguished by relative peace and stability, upholding the empire's boundaries and respecting its cultural achievements. Constantine the Great, a Roman emperor who reigned for 31 years, was famed for legalizing Christianity and establishing the city of Constantinople. Following his success at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, his conversion to Christianity signified a crucial turning point in the Roman Empire's history. His commitment to Christianity led to the construction of many churches and the First Council of Nicaea, creating a unified theology for the faith. Constantine also won military and political achievements, including reunifying the empire and defeating rivals and barbarian tribes. Constantinople, strategically positioned at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, symbolized the empire's grandeur and the rising influence of Christianity. During his reign, Christianity became the dominant religion in the Roman Empire. Historians continually evaluate Constantine's motivations for accepting Christianity, and theologians and historians argue the extent to which he should be dubbed a Christian emperor. The decision of Constantine to cease the persecution of Christians in the Roman Empire became a turning point for early Christianity, known as the Triumph of the Church, the Peace of the Church, or the Constantinian Shift. Constantine became a great patron of the Church and set a precedent for the standing of the Christian emperor within the Church. He is regarded as a saint, and apostolos in the Eastern Orthodox Church and Oriental Orthodox Church are examples of Christian monarchs. The decline of the Western Roman Empire was a complicated historical narrative defined by internal flaws and foreign forces. Economic instability, excessive taxes, and widespread inflation contributed to the empire's demise. Administrative corruption and inefficiency further hampered the empire's ability to govern its vast territories effectively. Barbarian invasions, led by tribes like the Visigoths, Vandals, and Huns, exacerbated the economic troubles. Attila, the Huns' formidable leader, drained the empire's resources and weakened its defenses. His campaigns in the mid-5th century caused fear across the empire, but he never succeeded in capturing Rome itself. The deposition of Romulus Augustulus in AD 476 marks the symbolic end of the Western Roman Empire. Odoacer, a Germanic chieftain, declared himself king of Italy, marking the definitive collapse of Roman authority in the West. The decline of the Western Roman Empire was not due to a single reason or event, but a culmination of persistent internal flaws and unrelenting external pressures. Beneath the grandeur of empire lies the heartbeat of daily life, where patricians, plebeians, and slaves weave a complex web of existence. From bustling markets to intimate homes, the stories of ordinary Romans reveal a world of hidden dramas and everyday triumphs. The secrets of ancient life linger in the shadows of Rome's majestic structures, painting a vivid picture of a thriving civilization. Roman citizens were separated into two distinct classes, plebeians and patricians. The patricians were the governing class of the early Roman Empire, with only specific families belonging to them. Plebeians, on the other hand, were farmers, craftsmen, laborers, and soldiers. In early Rome, plebeians had few rights. As patricians held all government and religious positions, they made laws, owned lands, and were generals over the army. The plebeians' revolt began in 494 BC, and almost 200 years later, plebeians acquired additional privileges, including the freedom to run for office and marry patricians. One of the early concessions that plebeians won from the patricians was the Law of the 12 Tables, which safeguarded the basic rights of all Roman citizens regardless of their social standing. Eventually, plebeians could elect their government officials, called tribunes, who represented them and fought for their rights. They also had the power to veto new laws from the Roman Senate. As time passed, there became few legal differences between the plebeians and the patricians, and wealthy plebeians became part of the Roman nobility. A third social class in Roman society was the slaves, with around one-third of people living in Rome being slaves. Plebeians and patricians did not mix socially, with Julius Caesar being a patrician but sometimes considered a champion of the common people. The plebeian council, led by elected tribunes, passed many new laws due to simpler procedures than the Senate. People's housing and living conditions in ancient Rome were greatly influenced by their social level. The wealthiest and most privileged people resided in huge villas with many open spaces, courtyards, and gardens. Conversely, the poorer classes frequently had subpar ventilation and sanitation and lived in small, packed flats or tenements. In ancient Rome, access to education was limited to the affluent and elite classes. Rich families sent their children to formal schooling, where they learned math, reading, and writing skills in addition to rhetoric and public speaking. On the other hand, the lower classes were frequently compelled to labor from an early age and had less access to education. Social status also had a big impact on occupations. Members of the affluent and privileged class held positions in the military, the government, and the arts. In contrast, the lower classes were employed in the manufacturing, service, and agricultural sectors. In ancient Rome, religion greatly impacted social relations and daily life. The Romans were polytheistic, worshipping many gods and goddesses, with a patron goddess associated with each social class. Religious rites and festivals played a significant role in social life and were expected to be attended. Depending on one's social level, ancient Rome had several social gatherings. Rich and powerful people in society delighted in extravagant dinners, celebrations, and cultural activities. Conversely, the lower classes had more subdued social events like neighborhood fairs and religious celebrations. Social status was crucial to day-to-day activities and interpersonal relationships in ancient Rome. Every socioeconomic class had distinct possibilities and experiences ranging from housing and school to religion and social gatherings. Daily life during the Roman Empire was significantly different from early Rome. Women's rights changed rapidly towards the end of the 1st century AD, with women owning land, running businesses, freeing enslaved people, making wills, and becoming heirs. Adopted children had the same rights as any other children, based on their sex and age. Wealthy ancient Roman homes supported enslaved people. In old age, the ancient Romans still greatly respected and cared for their elderly, who would one day be honored at the Parentalia festival of the dead. The Forum, the center of each town, was where people went to do their daily shopping and get the news. Although their role in government was greatly decreased, the great orators of the Senate were still speaking in the Forum. Public baths were no longer only for wealthy patrician men. Both plebeians and patricians, men and women, used the baths provided they could pay the admission price. Most baths had separate hours for men and women, and some baths were so large that they had duplicate facilities. People tried to visit the baths at least once every day. Baths were arranged rather like a very large mall, with bathing pools. At one time, there were as many as 900 public baths during the Roman Empire. Food was also important in the empire, with lower classes occasionally enjoying porridge made of vegetables, fish, bread, olives, wine, and meat. The lower classes had a program to help them, somewhat like a welfare program. Upper classes enjoyed fresh meat, fish, fruits, vegetables, and bread, and used honey to sweeten food. They enslaved people to cook and clean, and they ate with their fingers. People could stop at a bakery for a quick meal or buy a pancake early in the morning. Food was served at the baths as well. If people had the money, they could dine out. Religion was a very important part of daily life in the empire, as it was during the Republic. Everyone had to worship the Roman gods, which was law. Temples grew more elaborate as Rome grew, and the Pantheon, a temple dedicated to all the Roman gods, is still one of the largest single-span domes in the world. Entertainment was another significant aspect of daily life in the Roman Empire. The Circus Maximus was a public entertainment center used mostly for chariot racing, and the Colosseum was a huge public entertainment center. It could seat 45,000 people and was where the ancient Romans went to see horrific fighting between gladiators and conflicts between men and wild beasts. The campus, located near the Tiber River, was the old drill ground for soldiers. Young men from Rome gathered at the campus to play and exercise. On the campus, men participated in foot racing, jumping, archery, and wrestling. If wealthy Romans stayed home at night, they lit oil lamps to enjoy the evening, while the poor, unless they went out, went to bed as soon as it got dark, as they could not afford to keep oil lamps burning. Pompeii and Herculaneum, located in the Italian region of Campania, were crucial ancient Roman trade routes for transporting goods throughout the Roman Empire. The corbitas, a round-hulled ship with a curving prow and stern, was the most effective way to transport goods, carrying cargo weighing between 70 and 350 tons. The Romans developed deep harbors at key locations to increase shipping effectiveness, such as Ostia, which was set up in AD 50 to guide sailors. Pompey the Great promised the Senate that the pirate threat in the Mediterranean Sea would be eliminated, allowing Rome to receive its much-needed grain shipments for its citizens. The Pompeian area was rich in Mediterranean food, including olives, olive oil, wine, vegetables, fruit, bread, cheese, lentils, chickpeas, beans, melons, almonds, and nuts. Pompeii's proximity to the seaside also enhanced the fishing industry, making agricultural products the most sold. Handcrafts and luxury products were also very important in trade. Pompeii was a city that met its needs both by locally produced goods and by imported goods from across the Mediterranean basin and beyond. Excavated commercial goods, objects, and findings from Pompeii provide insight into the ancient civilization's economy and trade patterns. Important commercial ports and products were emphasized, and significant findings from Pompeii, such as pottery assemblages, will lead to a further understanding of commercial relations. Pompeii, a Roman province, was a hub of commerce and trade during the early Roman Empire. The city's strategic location, close to the port of Puteoli, allowed it to take advantage of its position as an entrepot for the Sarno River Valley. The Roman army provided high security along trade routes, allowing merchants to reach the Red Sea ports in India. These improved commercial activities enriched Roman society and resulted in price inflation and increased wealth spent on exotic Eastern luxuries. During the early Roman Empire, commercial routes between the Mediterranean basin and South Asia were complex networks covering the Erythraean Sea, Parthian lands, and beyond. The periplus of the Erythraean Sea is considered a mirror of the Roman world due to its socially and economically close relations. Wine was one of the main commercial products traded in ancient times, with the Campania region, central and north Italy, being the preferred choice. Egypt's importation was significant, providing a large grain supply to Rome. With the capture of Egypt, distant land trade became more convenient, with Romans importing silk, ivory carvings, glassware, spices, dyestuff, and scents from distant lands for wealthy Romans. Roman agriculture, a vital part of the ancient Roman Empire, was a testament to innovation, resilience, and the timeless bond between humanity and the land. Farmers in ancient Rome cultivated crops like wheat, barley, grapes, and olives, which were essential to the empire's economy and diet. Techniques such as the sturdy plow, irrigation, and water management techniques were passed down through generations. Roman agriculture also emphasized innovation, with farmers constantly seeking new ways to improve yields and increase efficiency. In recent years, Roman engineers began experimenting with harnessing steam and water mills to automate grain grinding, revolutionizing food production and distribution. Roman farm life was a pastoral idyll centered around the familia rustica, the extended family unit that formed the backbone of rural life in ancient Rome. Farmers worked tirelessly, planting seeds and caring for crops and cattle throughout winter. Despite the challenges of drought, flooding, insects, and diseases, life on a Roman farm offered satisfaction, camaraderie, and a deep connection to the land and nature. The state's agricultural policies and administration shaped the destiny of the Roman people, ensuring land was used productively, crops were planted and harvested promptly, and farmers were treated fairly. Despite the challenges of nature and market fluctuations, the Roman Empire's agricultural policies exemplified remarkable efficiency and organization, ensuring food security and the empire's enduring prosperity. Roman agriculture was vital to the empire's life, sustaining its people and fueling its expansion. Bread, vegetables, and meat were staple foods, with meat being the center of the culinary repertoire. Wine, a symbol of abundance and refinement, flowed through Roman society, influencing every aspect of life. The agricultural gods and goddesses, such as Ceres and Bacchus, were revered for their protection and guidance. Rituals during key agricultural events strengthened community bonds and fostered solidarity. The religious importance of farming permeated Roman art and literature, with depictions of deities adorning temples and references to agricultural cycles in poetry and prose. Understanding the agricultural heritage is essential for understanding Roman society and culture as it shaped today's world. Roman religion was a complicated system of imperial and provincial customs influenced by the presence of Greeks on the Italian peninsula. The Romans believed in their collective piety and ascribed their success as a world power to their strong ties with the gods. Their polytheistic faith venerated numerous deities. The presence of Greeks on the Italian peninsula introduced key religious traditions, such as the cultus of Apollo. Roman religion was practical and contractual, founded on the Deus des I give that you might give. It was based on knowledge and the right practice of prayer, ceremony, and sacrifice rather than faith or dogma. Even the most dubious among Rome's intellectual elite, such as Cicero, recognized religion as a source of social order. As the Roman Empire expanded, migrants brought local cults, many of which became popular among Italians. Christianity was the most successful of these beliefs, becoming the official state religion in 380. Religion was a part of daily life for ordinary Romans, with household shrines, neighborhood shrines, and sacred places. A group of priestesses known as the Vestal Virgins served the goddess Vesta, the patroness of the home, family, and hearth in ancient Rome. As women entrusted with tending Vesta's sacred fire and carrying out other religious tasks, they occupied a special and revered place in Roman culture. Vestal virgins were young girls chosen from aristocratic Roman households, usually between the ages of 6 and 10, although active duty normally lasted for 30 years, split into 3 decades. 10 years of training, 10 years of carrying out the tasks, and 10 years mentoring new initiates. Their service was a lifetime commitment. The main duty of the Vestal Virgins was to ensure that the sacred fire in the Temple of Vesta never went out, since it was thought that its extinguishment would portend doom for Rome. They also prepared ritual materials for state sacrifices and participated in several public rituals. Important official papers and wills, including those of emperors, were also given to the Vestals for protection. In Roman culture, the Vestal Virgins were granted certain benefits that distinguished them from ordinary women. They received freedom from their father's authority and the ability to oversee their property. In addition, they received reserved seats in public gatherings and were shielded by unique legal provisions. However, harsh punishments and limitations were also associated with their status. Throughout their service, though, the Vestals were expected to remain virgins. If they broke this rule, they would suffer severe consequences. A Vestal who was found guilty of violating her chaste vow was buried alive, while her lover was executed by public whipping. In ancient Rome, public festivals were integral to religious and social life. These celebrations, called feriae, served as holy ceremonies and occasions for group amusement. The Roman calendar featured several significant festivals, each honoring a different deity or historical event. Saturnalia, a December celebration honoring the deity of time and agriculture, was considered the most exuberant Roman event. Lupercalia, held in mid-February, was a fertility celebration honoring Romulus and Remus, the mythical founders of Rome, and Faunus, the Roman god of agriculture. Floralia, a celebration honoring the goddess of flowers and spring, occurs in late April or early May. It features sports, theater productions, and the dispersion of flowers. Parentalia, a somber celebration in February, pays tribute to departed ancestors by visiting tombs and cemeteries, bringing offerings and dining with their spirits. Roman public holidays fulfilled both social and religious purposes. Religiously, they were necessary to please the gods and win their favor for the prosperity and security of society. Priests and priestesses meticulously prepared and carried out the ceremonies for each festival, demonstrating the close relationship between Roman religion and government activities. Socially, festivals provided a chance to escape the monotony of everyday life and unite as a community. They included free-to-attend public sports, theater productions, chariot races, and gladiatorial matches supported by powerful political figures or affluent sponsors. Politically, public festivals had important political implications. Political leaders often exploited them to win over the public, such as Augustus and Julius Caesar, who extended the schedule of public games and festivals. Modern Christmas and New Year's celebrations incorporate features of Roman festivals like Saturnalia, which affected later European traditions and celebrations. The legions of Rome, a formidable force, carved out an empire through innovation and sheer will. Tales of legendary generals and epic battles highlight strategies that changed the course of history. Behind the disciplined facade of Rome's military machine lies a world of mystery and power, shaping the very essence of Roman identity. Planning and strategy have been beneficial throughout history, as demonstrated by the Roman military. The heart of this formidable army consisted of the legions, each a well-tuned war machine whose structure and command hierarchy were as meticulously designed as the strategies they employed in combat. The skeleton of the Roman military's legendary organization was each legion, consisting of an average of 6,000 men, making it a microcosm of discipline and effectiveness. The three levels of the legion's command hierarchy were cohorts, centuries, and maniples, ranging from the least experienced recruit to the most experienced centurion. This hierarchy served a purpose beyond mere decoration. It allowed Roman troops to adjust to changing conditions on the battlefield considerably faster than their enemies. This tactical flexibility was unmatched in antiquity. The shrewd and ambitious Roman generals, whose names have reverberated throughout history, were positioned atop this military hierarchy. Figures like Julius Caesar and Scipio Africanus are examples of those whose conflicts spanned continents, founded empires, and conquered entire civilizations. Under their command, disciplined, well-trained and equipped Roman legionaries advanced over challenging terrain, from Germany's woodlands to North Africa's dunes. The precision with which the legions were formed was impressive. In addition to receiving intensive battle skills training, recruits were also instructed in building camps and fortifications, enabling them to fight wherever they were dispatched and fortify their locations. This adaptability was crucial since the legions often found themselves in isolated areas against opponents as varied as the landscapes they fought in. These tactical breakthroughs allowed the Roman army to conquer vast swaths of land and retain it against all enemies, all while establishing an empire that would have a lasting impact on the West for centuries to come. The sounds of their disciplined march and the sight of their brilliant armor and crimson cloaks, which live on in history, bear witness to their unparalleled military might. The Gallic Wars, a series of military campaigns led by Julius Caesar between 58 and 50 BCE, increased Caesar's authority and renown. As the governor of the Roman province of Gaul, Caesar planned to extend Rome's territory and authority by defeating the various Gallic tribes that inhabited the region. Brutal battles, sieges, and the final subjugation of the Gallic people defined these struggles. One of the most significant occurrences of the Gallic Wars was the Battle of Alesia in 52 BCE, where Caesar's army besieged the Gallic stronghold and eventually forced the surrender of the Gallic chieftain Vercingetorix. This victory heralded the end of organized resistance to Roman control in Gaul and reinforced Caesar's reputation as a skilled military strategist. The Gallic Wars also offered Caesar tremendous personal wealth as he plundered the conquered regions for their resources. This wealth allowed him to finance his political aspirations and further increase his influence within Rome, ultimately contributing to his ascent to power and the eventual end of the Roman Republic. This study examines the civil engineering projects completed by Roman legions during peacetime, emphasizing intricate projects like aqueducts, bridges, roads, and canals. They seek to demonstrate military intervention and defend the term civil engineering for the technical solutions of the engineering projects completed. The Roman army was seen as a wealth of knowledge and labor, and one of the ways the army intervened was by building cities and imposing architecture. The goal of snatching the soldiers from idleness and expanding the amount of arable land were the driving forces behind these public works. The Rhine Delta and the road that cut through the mountain under Trajan are examples of how the works were completed for the benefit of the local populace as well as the glory of Rome. The Fosses Mariennes, near Crau, and the canal connecting the Meuse and the Rhine were both built in large part by the Roman forces. These constructions were intended to serve the Roman soldiers without obstructing the Rhone's waterways. Under Nero, the Corinth Canal was a noteworthy undertaking that contradicted religious views, commercial customs, and religious convictions. The topographical engineer Nonius Datus, who handled the Groma with dexterity and expertise, was one of the specialists and laborers supplied by the Roman army. Aqueduct construction, such as that of the Saldai Aqueduct, was carried out in phases under the supervision of military engineer Nonius Datus. The building of these canals was carried out in phases, with the aediles of Saldai hiring Nonius Datus, a specialist in leveling, as a liberator to carry out the surveys, leveling, and route finding. Saldai's technical services and firms completed the work, and Datus was invited back in 147 to oversee the project. With this threefold intervention, the governor of Mauritania expressed gratitude to the Legio III Augusta for making Nonius Datus available to him, emphasizing the exact and timely interventions. The Roman soldiers contributed significantly to the building of aqueducts and canals, highlighting the brilliance of Roman culture. Throughout their existence, the Roman soldiers were highly involved in building roads and maintaining bridges and canals. The bas-reliefs of Trajan's column in Rome, where men were dispatched to clean the route, trim shrubs, and ease the army's march, testify to the building of roads. Mile marker inscriptions witness the Roman army's achievements in civil engineering. 3 legions in the Cantabrian Wars constructed the Roman road connecting Pamplona and Zaragoza as one example. The Roman army needed to build bridges to cross rivers on dry land. There were 4 kinds of bridges: wooden, boat, stone, and mixed. Caesar's bridge across the Rhine was an exploit, but the Trajan bridge over the Danube exemplifies a mixed bridge. Boat bridges were unquestionably useful to the Roman army, as demonstrated by the Martorell Bridge in Portugal and the Chemtu Bridge in Tunisia. The Iron Gates, a 130 kilometers long and 300 m deep valley dividing Serbia from Romania, were remarkable. Trajan organized the invasion of the Gettodatian kingdom to subdue them. Among the empire's artwork from the 1st to the 3rd century, the most well-known is the stone Drobeta Bridge. With his expertise, Apollodorus of Damascus built the bridge. Throughout their existence, the Roman troops were instrumental in building and maintaining roads, bridges, and canals. Their actions show they were superior in conflict's political, military, and technical facets. Roman civilization was characterized by a strong military presence in quarries and mines, where captives were employed. The army controlled the Chemtu quarry, known for its superior marble and porphyry, and it was dependent on the Patrimonium Caesaris. The Roman troops supplied large blocks and columns for the Pantheon and Venus Temple using the highly prized granite diorite of Mons Claudianus in Egypt. Beginning in the middle of the 1st century BC, veteran colonies were established across the empire, upending the layout of historic towns. The foundation of these colonies, which corresponded with the end of the Civil War, was named after the soldiers who had initially lived there. The colony names honored the soldiers who were the first to establish themselves there. Veterans of Legion the Sussex founded colonies such as Lyon in Gaul, Narbo Martius in 115 BC, Arles in 115 BC, Freyas in 49 BC, and Orange in 35 BC centuries later. In 100 AD, Trajan established Colonia Marciana Trajana Thamugati, the Pompeii of Africa, in North Africa. With the city expanding from 15 to 50 and 90 hectares and the suburbs doubling its surface area by 4, these newly developed areas gave rise to a new way of living. Famous Roman structures known as amphitheaters were constructed across the colonies, notably Drobeta on the Danube River. These buildings, which were constructed with the deployment of legions, served as training grounds for soldiers and as venues for architectural projects. They were constructed quickly and cheaply from stone, wood, and soil resources. Gladiators from C. Aurelius Claudius's school were brought in to instruct soldiers in new parrying and striking techniques. Leaders outside of military camps concentrated on routine duties to keep men from being idle. One such instance is the La Coruna Lighthouse, often known as the Tower of Hercules today. The Roman army was heavily involved in civil engineering projects, constructing aqueducts, mending roads, creating channels, and erecting bridges. It is crucial to remember that civilian laborers completed most building and maintenance projects on empire territory. The Roman army's outstanding achievements in civil engineering are evident across the empire and continue to serve as a model today. However, it is unfortunate that there are some repetitions, an extensive plan, and no maps to help pinpoint the locations of the places, sites, monuments, and artwork mentioned. The Roman Empire's military might shape Roman culture's social, economic, and political framework. Following their military service, men were often dispatched to colonies, which grew to become major Roman hotspots and dispersed Roman culture, architecture, and language throughout the empire. This strategy strengthened the empire's hold on power and encouraged peace and order in these areas. Roman engineers also constructed a vast highway network connecting far-flung provinces, towns, and villages. These routes facilitated military operations, trade, and communication. The economy expanded and grew richer due to the efficient flow of people, goods, and information made possible by these roads. Roman engineers also built aqueducts that supplied fresh water to towns, improving sanitary conditions and public health while encouraging the expansion of metropolitan regions. Conquered peoples could assimilate into Roman civilization because of the military's extensive presence, significantly impacting society and culture. Several settlements were granted a cohesive Roman identity upon adopting Roman laws, traditions, and language. Roman religion grew because locals were exposed to Roman gods and rites, and the military participated in these festivities. The military was crucial in defining Roman public festivities and spectacles, including gladiatorial battles and victorious processions, showing its centrality in Roman culture. Establishing military control was a requirement for obtaining political power, and well-trained and disciplined legions provided domestic and international security from upheavals. Advancements in transportation, metallurgy, and construction technology from the military were often transferred to civilian life. Roman technological prowess was demonstrated by employing military engineering concepts in constructing public buildings, bridges, and other infrastructure. Military advancements guaranteed Rome's hegemony and impacted societies long after the Roman Empire collapsed. These events greatly and widely impacted Roman culture. As the Western Empire crumbles, the Eastern Empire rises like a phoenix, centered in the glittering Constantinople. Through centuries of change, from Justinian's ambitious reign to the religious divides of the Great Schism, Byzantium stands resilient. The secrets of survival and transformation lie within this beacon of culture and power. preserving the legacy of Rome. Emperor Theodosius I, who presided over the Roman Empire, made a significant choice in 395 AD that marked the start of a new chapter in history. His reign was characterized by internal strife and external dangers, such as pressure from paganism and different Christian factions. Despite these obstacles, Theodosius made notable attempts to preserve unity within the empire. Following Theodosius's demise in 395 AD, his two sons, Arcadius and Honorius, split the Roman Empire. Arcadius inherited the Eastern Roman Empire, ruling from the affluent, urbanized city of Constantinople, which dominated important trade routes and had a strong administrative framework. After the imperial court relocated from Milan to Ravenna, Honorius inherited the Western Roman Empire. The Western Empire experienced several difficulties, including internal instability, barbarian invasions, and economic collapse. The empire was divided due to various circumstances, including cultural differences, economic inequities, military pressures, and administrative efficiency. Significant long-term effects of the split included the demise of the Western Roman Empire, which reached its apex in 476 AD with the Germanic leader Odoacer's overthrow of Romulus Augustulus, the last Roman emperor. The Byzantine Empire, often known as the Eastern Roman Empire, flourished for another millennium. It upheld and extended Roman customs, legislation, and traditions while incorporating influences from Greek and Christian cultures. The Byzantine Empire emerged as a bulwark of stability and cultural advancement throughout the Middle Ages. The split was also significantly influenced by religious changes. Theodosius, who established Nicene Christianity as the official religion, created the basis for the Christianization of Europe, helping to shape the religious landscapes of Eastern and Western Europe. In summary, Emperor Theodosius I's partition of the Roman Empire was a calculated solution to the complex problems the enormous empire faced, and it paved the way for the ultimate collapse of the Western Roman Empire and the long-lasting Byzantine Empire. One of the most important moments in the history of the Roman Empire was the establishment of Constantinople, a magnificent metropolis. Emperor Constantine the Great, who reigned from 306 to 337 AD, acknowledged Constantinople as a new power center within the Roman Empire. He selected the ancient Greek city of Byzantium for Constantinople because of its advantageous location on the Bosporus Strait, which connects Europe and Asia. Constantine had a lofty goal for Constantinople: to build a metropolis of equal grandeur and importance to Rome. Building vast fortifications, public structures, and palaces required a great deal of planning and resources, and laborers from all across the empire contributed to the creation of Constantinople. One of the city's most notable characteristics was its strong defense system, including the Theodosian walls, constructed in the 5th century, offering an almost impenetrable barrier against attackers. Due to its advantageous position on the Bosporus Strait, the city became a crossroads of cultures and an important hub for commerce between Europe and Asia. Ships crowded its docks, facilitating the flow of wealth into the empire. Constantinople's military significance made it feasible to resist Persian and Ottoman attacks successfully. Additionally, the Eastern Roman Empire, commonly known as the Byzantine Empire, could fight off invaders for decades following the decline of the Western Roman Empire thanks to its marine and land fortifications. The Byzantine Empire was established with the foundation of Constantinople and would uphold Roman law, culture, and customs for more than a millennium. As the home of the Orthodox Church and the site of significant religious councils, the city was a shining example of the Christian faith. Beyond its walls, Constantinople left a lasting legacy that shaped medieval architecture and culture and established standards for Byzantine administration, art, and architecture. Over millennia, the Byzantine Empire was heavily impacted by its important rulers, particularly Justinian I, Heraclius, and Basil II. Justinian I, who governed from 527 to 565 AD, is noted for his ambitious legislative improvements and military achievements, which included the recovery of North Africa and Italy from the Vandals. His efforts, directed by General Belisarius, drastically transformed the Byzantine Empire's armed forces and administrative system. Heraclius, who was emperor from 610 until 641 AD, also made significant contributions. His military skill paid off at the pivotal Battle of Nineveh in 627 AD when Persian dominance was ended, and Byzantine rule was re-established over previously lost territory. He divided the empire into military districts in addition to these significant administrative adjustments, which increased the efficiency of the Byzantine army and ensured a more robust defense against invasions in the future. Basil II, sometimes called the Bulgar Slayer, ruled Byzantium from 976 to 1025 AD and is remembered as one of its most formidable military leaders. His most notable military achievement was his relentless battle against the Bulgarian Empire, which kept the empire's northern boundaries intact for many centuries. Basil II instituted administrative and economic reforms, consolidated imperial power, reduced the power of the nobility, and stabilized the empire's economy. All of these measures reinforced the Byzantine state. The reigns of Basil II, Heraclius, and Justinian II demonstrate how strong and dynamic the Byzantine Empire was. Their unique achievements, including legal reform, administrative genius, and military skill, impacted Byzantine history and left lasting legacies. Because of their efforts to maintain and expand the empire, which linked the classical heritage of Rome with the emerging civilizations of medieval Europe and the Near East, Byzantium maintained its position as a major player in the medieval world. With Orthodox Christianity as the cornerstone of its culture, the Byzantine Empire lasted for more than a millennium and was a center of religious and cultural growth. The faith's origins may be traced to the early Christian communities in the Eastern Roman Empire, with Constantine the Great's Edict of Milan in 313 AD allowing Christians religious tolerance. Constantinople's status as a hub of Christian doctrine and practice was further cemented in 330 AD, when Constantine established it as the new capital. The First Council of Nicaea, which Constantine called in 325 AD, greatly influenced the definition of true Christian teaching, notably the essence of Christ and the Nicene Creed. Ecumenical councils held at Constantinople, Ephesus, and Chalcedon further shaped the doctrinal underpinnings of what would become Eastern Orthodoxy. The ecclesiastical art of the Byzantine Empire, especially its iconography, was one of its greatest artistic triumphs, believed to be windows to the holy. These sacred icons were vital to Orthodox devotion. However, icons also sparked the iconoclast controversy in the 8th and 9th centuries, a conflict over their use between opposing factions within the empire. The Second Council of Nicaea, assembled in 787 AD to settle this disagreement, sanctioned icons in Orthodox worship and underlined the Byzantine Church's distinct theological and cultural legacy. The Great Schism of 1054 brought about the formal separation that still exists today between the Eastern Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic Church. Key issues included the papal authority, which highlighted the Pope's sovereignty over all Christians, and the Filioque controversy, which concerned the Western Church's inclusion of the term "and the Son" in the Nicene Creed. The spiritual and cultural identities of Eastern Europe, Russia, and the Balkans have been shaped by the long-lasting cultural and theological changes under the Byzantine Empire. Many Byzantine architectural, mosaic, and iconographic works influence creative traditions outside the empire's boundaries. Not only did the Great Schism split Christianity, but it also shaped Europe's political and theological landscape and the Near East going forward. The fall of Rome plunges the city into the Dark Ages, a time of chaos and transformation. Amid invasions and the rise of the papacy, the city slowly reclaims its status as a spiritual and political hub. In these turbulent centuries, Rome's ancient spirit endures, shrouded in mystery and reinvention, shaping the medieval rebirth of a city laden with history. The Dark Ages of the early Middle Ages marked significant changes in Rome, the capital of the Roman Empire. The fall of the Roman Empire in 476 AD led to invasions by barbarian tribes and a breakdown of political authority. The Lombards created a monarchy in northern and central Italy by 568 AD. The Romans sought safety and protection behind the Church, and Pope Gregory I, later known as Gregory the Great, played a vital role in this power vacuum. He fortified Rome and negotiated with the Lombard leaders, enhancing the Church's global influence. Pope Stephen II's request for aid from the Frankish sovereign Pepin the Short in the 8th century facilitated the establishment of the Papal States in 756 AD, giving the Pope dominion over central Italy. The papacy's evolving role as a mediator for urban denizens and external powers significantly influenced Rome's transformation. As Rome became a center for Christian pilgrimages, it gained more spiritual importance. The early Middle Ages saw Rome undergo both rebirth and ruin. However, the Pope became a formidable institution that led Rome through the Dark Ages and prepared for its eventual multi-century comeback. The coronation of Charlemagne in 800 remains a subject of debate among historians, with questions surrounding whether he initially wanted to become emperor or if he only wanted a personal honor. Einhard's account of Charlemagne's last journey is prompted by Pope Leo III's plea for protection from the Romans, who had torn out his eyes and cut out his tongue. Charlemagne was given the title Emperor and Augustus, but initially, he was displeased with this and bore the hatred of the Roman emperors. The coronation of Charlemagne's son, Charles, was planned for the same day, raising questions about whether Leo also used the ceremony to crown his father. Historians have suspected the coronation was planned against Charlemagne's will, and new contemporary documents could help clarify his intentions. In April 799, a faction of relatives and confidants of the previous Pope Hadrian rebelled against Leo III, who was imprisoned in the monastery of St. Stephen and Sylvester. The rebels aimed to remove Leo from his high office, but rumors spread quickly, exaggerating and distorting events beyond recognition. Charlemagne sent the Pope back to the apostolic city alone, and it was not until August of the following year that he ordered a military expedition to Italy from Mainz. The journey had imperial overtones, and the Pope had Charles ceremoniously received at the 12th milestone outside the city. By the end of 800, Leo and Charles had enough time to negotiate the emperorship and the coronation ceremony in detail. On the 25th of December 800, the clergy at Charles's court noted that Pope Leo placed a crown on his head, and then all the Roman believers unanimously called out, "Life and victory to the sublime Charles, the peace-bringing emperor of the Romans, crowned by God." The Pope honored him with a kneeling, omitting the titles Patricius, Emperor, and Augustus. In the 21st century, what is of interest in such a story is primarily the goals, motives, and intentions of the actors, as well as the background and causes of the events. Charlemagne's empire could have resulted from an unforeseeable sequence of unexpected events, rumors, solid half-knowledge, and unintended side effects of decisions made on such a poor basis of information. The papacy, the institution of the Pope as head of the Catholic Church, has a history dating back to the time of Peter. The first bishop of Rome was Damasus I, and many of his successors were obscure figures. Temporal rulers who controlled the Italian peninsula, known as the Ostrogothic, Byzantine and Frankish papacy, influenced the papacy. Over time, the papacy consolidated its geographical claims to the papal states. In the early Christian era, the bishops of Rome did not enjoy temporal power until Constantine I. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the Pope was affected by the temporal monarchs that governed the Italian peninsula, resulting in the Ostrogothic, Byzantine, and Frankish papacy. The Pope consolidated his territorial claims to the papal states and was occupied by strong Roman families during the pontifical pornocracy. In the second millennium, the papacy experienced increasing conflict with the sovereigns and ecclesiastical authorities of the Byzantine and Holy Roman Empire, leading to the Great Schism and the investiture controversy. Political instability in Rome forced the Pope to reside far from the city, establishing his court in various cities. The Pope's return to Rome followed the Great Western Schism, which divided the Western Church between competing papal claimants. Rome awakens during the Renaissance, a period of unparalleled artistic and intellectual revival. Visionaries such as Michelangelo and Raphael redefine beauty, while powerful popes maneuver in the shadows. The fervor and intrigue of this era restore Rome to its former glory, fueled by extraordinary creativity and ambition. The Papal Renaissance was a period of great artistic and architectural activity in Rome. This revival of artistic and ideological aspirations for the classical and Romanesque past was fueled by powerful popes who aimed to bring the city back to its former greatness. It developed during the late Middle Ages and later peaked during the pre-Reformation Renaissance period. This era saw the commissioning of some of the most iconic works of art and architecture in Western history, many of which remain nearly a half-millennium later. One of the most powerful popes of the Papal Renaissance, Pope Julius II, known as the Warrior Pope for his pursuit of a military policy to strengthen the territorial holdings of the papacy, firmly placed his indelible mark on the face of Rome. Pope Julius II planned the construction of the new St. Peter's Basilica in Rome to replace the old St. Peter's, a seriously dilapidated structure in the lineage of the Papal Basilica Apostolorum. He entrusted the design of the new basilica to the architect Donato Bramante, a project that would drag on for more than 100 years. One of the most widely told legends for the origins of St. Peter's revolutionary dome design is that the Pope turned to Bramante with the idea that the first Christian emperor, Constantine, wanting the largest church in Christendom, built his own, and that therefore, the Pope should do the same, only much larger and grander, capped by a dome based on the shape of the Pantheon in ancient Rome. Julius II also decorated the Vatican. He even had Michelangelo paint the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, a job that lasted years but became one of the pinnacles of art in the Western world. The ceiling, detailing stories from the Book of Genesis, is an epic testament to Michelangelo's otherworldly levels of creative talent. Building St. Peter's Basilica was one of Leo X's ongoing projects, beginning with Julius II. He appointed many architects and painters to work on the project, guaranteeing that the basilica would represent the church's supremacy. A remarkable upsurge in creative and building projects characterized the Papal Renaissance. Two popes who attempted to elevate Rome and the Church through patronage were Julius II and Leo X. Notable works that will always be a part of the city's cultural character were produced during this time. The Papal Renaissance saw Rome become a hub of creative minds and talented artists during a period of great artistic and intellectual vigor. Great individuals such as Leonardo da Vinci, Raphael, and Michelangelo left an indelible mark on human heritage. Michelangelo Buonarroti was born in 1475 and is known as one of the greatest painters in history, notably for painting the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Initially, Pope Julius II opposed having murals painted that showed events from Genesis and depicted beautifully yet powerfully human anatomy at work. His marble sculptures, including Pietà and David, demonstrate his extraordinary talent for portraying his subjects' beauty and passion. Another prominent member of the Papal Renaissance, Raphael Sanzio, was born in 1483 and was renowned for his melodic compositions and elegant figures. Raphael produced some of his most well-known works of art while working for Popes Julius II and Leo X. These include the paintings in the Stanze di Raffaello, often known as the Raphael Rooms, which house the famed School of Athens. It is a masterpiece of Renaissance art due to Raphael's clever use of depth perception and his ability to individualize each character's profile. Leonardo da Vinci, a polymathic artist born in 1452, had interests that spanned painting, sculpture, anatomy, and engineering, among other things. Examples include the Milan Last Supper, Mona Lisa, and a collection of his notebooks, which demonstrate his wide-ranging interests and original ideas. In this way, he combined science with art, capturing the essence of the Renaissance, when imagination knew no bounds. A Renaissance Italy was a time of great political and cultural change, shaped by important families' power relationships and desires, especially the Medici family. The Medici family rose to prominence through their banking empire in Florence, which became one of Europe's most powerful financial companies. Their riches and power enabled them to become significant participants in the political and cultural arenas of Renaissance Italy. Pope Leo X, a member of the powerful Florentine family, became pope in 1513, marking the beginning of considerable Medici influence in Rome. His papacy promoted his family's interests and subsidized the arts, commencing a period of opulent cultural and architectural initiatives. A complicated interplay of power, diplomacy, and ambition marked Renaissance politics in Rome. It brought people who were well known throughout Europe, making it not only a religious but also a political and cultural center. Popes controlled politically Renaissance Rome, thus playing significant roles both in terms of spiritual and earthly powers. Popes such as Leo X and Clement VII used papal patronage as an important tool for political maneuvering. They encouraged artists, architects, and intellectuals to improve their status in art and architecture, among other things, using this influence as popes. This led to the production of world-class works in art and architecture that have come to symbolize the spirit of the Renaissance period. For instance, they supported the construction of masterpieces that still define cultural life across Rome, including famous buildings like St. Peter's Basilica. As a result, Rome became important thanks to its art sponsorship projects, which resulted in iconic designs that are today part of the city's heritage. These were generally due to political events during the reigns of Renaissance Roman leaders, including the Medici family, and other broader dynamics of that time. Political changes in Renaissance Rome were influenced by the Medici family and other broader dynamics of that time. These changes are still remembered today in the city's historical records. Politics, ambition, and cultural support affected the city's history during this period. This legacy has continued to bewitch and motivate us to this day. The Reformation and Baroque eras brought seismic shifts to Rome's landscape. As religious upheavals roiled Europe, the city experienced both devastation and artistic magnificence. Amidst the grandeur of Baroque architecture and resilience in the face of adversity, Rome underwent relentless transformation, marked by hidden dramas and monumental change. In the 16th century, two major movements that drastically changed Europe were the Reformation and the Counter-Reformation. These revolutions, especially in Rome, the seat of Catholicism, greatly altered politics, society and culture, and revolutionized ecclesiastical life. German philosopher and monk Martin Luther launched the Protestant Reformation in 1517 when he posted his 95 Theses on the door of the Wittenberg Castle Church. Luther felt that the selling of indulgences, in particular, weakened the real spirit of faith and repentance, and this conduct was a critique of the practices of the Catholic Church. His opinions created political and religious upheaval as they soon spread across Europe. The Reformation directly threatened Rome, which served as the heart of the Catholic Church. The movement questioned the Pope's authority and the Church's established traditions, resulting in many requests for change. During this time, several Protestant groups emerged, each with its own interpretation of Christian theology. The growth of Protestantism challenged the Catholic Church's hegemony, which prompted a strong reaction. The Reformation greatly impacted Rome. Protestant concepts gained traction and revealed the Church's need for internal reform. Reformers emphasized the need for better spiritual and moral purity within the Church, and raised concerns such as clerical corruption and the lavish lives of the clergy. The Catholic Church called the Council of Trent in response to these difficulties to reaffirm important Catholic principles and address the concerns brought up by the Reformers. Significant reforms came about as a consequence of the Council, including the standardization of the Mass, the founding of seminaries to ensure that priests were properly trained, and the restoration of long-standing customs like saint veneration and the value of church tradition in addition to Scripture. The Catholic Church determinedly attempted to stem Protestantism's growth and restore its moral and spiritual underpinnings during the Counter-Reformation. Several influential people and new religious institutions, most notably Ignatius of Loyola's Society of Jesus, or Jesuits, were at the forefront of this movement. Spanish soldier turned priest Ignatius of Loyola was a key figure in the Counter-Reformation. He authored The Spiritual Exercises, a guide for spiritual growth and discernment, after a deep spiritual conversion. He established the Jesuit order in 1540, which significantly influenced the Catholic rebirth. The Jesuits prioritized teaching authentic Catholic doctrine, education, and missionary service. Across Europe, they founded colleges and institutions that developed into hubs of scholarship and strongholds of Catholic teaching. Strongly rooted in Catholic reason and faith, the Jesuits' focus on education and intellectual rigor provided a powerful counterbalance to the spreading Protestant notions. Other Counter-Reformation initiatives, including the Inquisition, which attempted to eradicate heresy, and the Index of Forbidden Books, which tried to regulate the distribution of Protestant literature, supplemented their efforts. The Counter-Reformation also brought about significant cultural changes, especially in the arts. The Church effectively communicated religious ideas and inspired faith through art and architecture. The Baroque style emerged during this time, distinguished by its grandiose compositions, dramatic use of light and shadow, and deep emotional expression. The Counter-Reformation was expressed in the works of artists like Caravaggio and Gian Lorenzo Bernini. Biblical subjects were given life in Caravaggio's paintings by dramatic lighting and harsh realism, which struck a profound chord with spectators. Aiming to reignite the faithful's spiritual zeal, Bernini's sculptures and architectural creations, such as the Ecstasy of St. Teresa and the Colonnade of St. Peter's Square, communicated a feeling of divine presence and emotional intensity. Ignatius Loyola's efforts and the artistic triumphs of the Baroque period were two significant factors in Catholicism's resurgence and its claim of dominance over the spiritual and cultural domains. Their impact was felt in Rome and across Christianity, influencing the development of Western history. The sack of Rome in 1527 was a horrific catastrophe that marked a turning point in the history of the Renaissance and the Catholic Church. The 16th century was distinguished by religious tensions. Great dynasties and the Renaissance, with the Protestant Reformation challenging the authority of the Catholic Church. Renaissance Italy played a prominent role within this European context, with many autonomous city-states, such as Florence, Venice, and Milan and Rome, each with its own government and authority. Wealthy families, such as the Medici in Florence and the Borgias in Rome, actively sponsored Renaissance artists and scientists, resulting in an explosion of creativity and knowledge. The Papal States, with Rome as its epicenter, were governed by the Pope and had interests in Italy, including Pope Clement VII, Charles V of the Holy Roman Empire, and Lutheran mercenaries. Pope Clement VII's primary motivation was to preserve and expand the power and influence of the Papal States he ruled as Pope. His political position and rivalries between foreign powers were fundamental in developing the events of 1527. Charles V of the Holy Roman Empire, a member of the House of Habsburg, had territorial ambitions in Italy and had a complex relationship with Pope Clement VII. His main motivation was to consolidate his authority over the Italian states and maintain control over the Papal States and Rome. The Lutheran mercenary forces, led by Charles III, Duke of Bourbon, were composed mostly of Protestant soldiers, motivated primarily by economic gain and religious sympathies with the Protestant Reformation. The siege and fall of Rome in 1527 were tragic events that marked a significant turning point in the city's history. The loss of artistic treasures, violence against the population, and the destruction of historic buildings had a lasting impact on the cultural and artistic fabric of the city. The consequences and legacy of the sack of Rome in 1527 have been significant. The humiliation of the Pope and the Catholic Church before the Lutheran forces and the destruction of the Eternal City shook the authority of the Church in political and religious matters. This event contributed to the religious division in Europe and the deepening of the enmity between Catholics and Protestants. The sack of Rome undermined the image of the Catholic Church as an invulnerable and holy institution, and the Pope's vulnerability to the invading forces was a blow to his prestige. In the long term, this event contributed to a period of reform within the Catholic Church known as the Counter-Reformation or Catholic Reformation, in which the Church responded to the criticisms and challenges of the Protestant Reformation. The sack of Rome in 1527 had significant political and religious consequences in Europe. It altered the perception of Rome as an eternal city and shook the collective consciousness of civilization's fragility. The Baroque in Rome was an artistic movement that emerged to save and restore Rome from its economic, political, and cultural suffering. With their masterpieces, great artists such as Bernini, Borromini, and Caravaggio gave new life and light to a city hit by looting and economic and political problems. The Renaissance had gifted Rome with artists like Raphael and Michelangelo. However, the sacking of Rome by Germans and Spaniards left the Papal City at rock bottom, with barely 25,000 inhabitants and crime on the streets. In the late 16th and early 17th centuries, the papacy began recovering the city, and new geniuses such as Bernini, Borromini, and Caravaggio emerged. The popes, like in the Renaissance, relied on the great talents of the moment to give Rome a new life. And this period, the Baroque in Rome, ended up giving the city a structure very close to what we have today. Rome in the second half of the 16th century was defined by some travelers as the corpse of a city, far from imperial Rome and far from being able to care about art. Rome had bigger problems and remained that way for decades. With the Baroque in Rome, from the great families to the popes, their main driving force was almost to beautify Rome again. The Vatican had a great role in the Baroque, with the Pope commissioning Bernini to create a new square at the height of Rome. Bernini, with the incredible colonnade, created one of the most beautiful and important squares in the world, St. Peter's Square, and both titles are held high to this day. Piazza Navona is another great square that took shape in the Baroque era of Rome. Bernini was responsible for building its central fountain, the magnificent Fountain of the Four Rivers. Borromini did the same with the Basilica of Sant'Agnese in front of the fountain. The two Baroque masters made Piazza Navona what it is today, one of the most spectacular places in Rome. Bernini and Borromini were allies and rivals of the Baroque in Rome. They lived together in Piazza Navona, or the Barberini Palace, and worked on their construction and decoration. Although their personal and professional coexistence was less idyllic than their results, they competed for great commissions from the papacy or powerful families. Bernini is known as an inexhaustible source of talent, as he was a complete, multifaceted artist like the Renaissance masters. The legacy of the Baroque in Rome took over the work of beautification and renovation that had begun in the Renaissance, while the Renaissance had Michelangelo and Raphael at Rome's service. In the Baroque, that role fell to Bernini and Borromini. The papacy, the great economic and political power behind both movements, hired both figures. The Baroque gave Rome St. Peter's Square, drew Piazza Navona, Piazza di Spagna, and Piazza del Popolo as we know them today. The 19th century brought upheaval and a fervent drive for unification, with Rome at the heart of Italy's national rebirth. Figures like Garibaldi and Cavour led a passionate struggle, culminating in the dramatic capture of Rome in 1870. The clandestine plots and heroic acts of this era paved the way for Italy's unification, with Rome emerging as the capital of a new nation. The Napoleonic Wars, sometimes called the Coalition Wars, were fought between a shifting coalition of European nations and the First French Empire, commanded by Emperor Napoleon I Bonaparte. They were partially a continuation of the conflicts resulting from the French Revolution and the French Revolutionary Wars, which included the First Coalition War and the Second Coalition War. These wars persisted throughout the First French Empire with the financial support of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. This era of French dominance over continental Europe resulted from these conflicts. The actual start of these conflicts is a topic of debate. Some believe they started in November 1799, when Napoleon became France's ruler. Others consider the war declaration and breach from the United Kingdom to France in 1803, following the brief period of peace from the Treaty of Amiens in 1802, as the beginning of the Napoleonic Wars. These accounts situate the war period between 1799 and 1802 within the framework of the French Revolutionary Wars. Napoleon became the first consul of France in 1799, taking over the politically unstable French First Republic after the 18 Brumaire coup d'état. He established a fiscally sound French state with a well-trained army and robust administration. On May 18, 1803, Great Britain declared war on France, breaking the terms of the Peace of Amiens and uniting Sweden, Russia, Naples, and Sicily in a coalition. Britain's entry into the war in 1803, according to Frank McLean, was caused by a mixture of economic motives and national neurosis, an irrational anxiety about Napoleon's motives and intentions. At the Battle of Trafalgar in October 1805, the combined Franco-Spanish naval fleet was soundly defeated by the British fleet, commanded by Admiral Nelson. This triumph stopped a planned invasion of Britain and guaranteed British dominance of the seas. Napoleon ended the Third Coalition and forced Austria to sign a peace treaty in December 1805 when he routed the joint Russian-Austrian army at Austerlitz. Fearing France's growing power, Prussia organized Russia, Saxony, and Sweden to form the Fourth Coalition, bringing the war back in October 1806. A fragile truce was quickly established on the continent after Napoleon routed the Russians at Friedland and the Prussians at Jena. The peace did not relieve the strain, and in 1809 the Fifth Coalition, commanded by Austria, resumed the war. The Austrians initially had unexpected success at Aspern-Essling, but lost badly at Wagram soon after. Napoleon invaded Portugal, the last British ally in continental Europe, to use his continental system to isolate and economically destabilize Britain. After seizing Lisbon in November 1807, when most French forces were in Spain, Napoleon took advantage of the situation to turn against his erstwhile friend. He overthrew the ruling Spanish royal family and crowned his brother Joseph I, King of Spain, in 1808. After 6 years of battle, the Spanish and Portuguese, with British backing, drove the French out of Iberia in 1814. Napoleon launched a large invasion of Russia in 1812 due to Russia's persistent violations of the Continental Blockade, caused by Russia's unwillingness to suffer the economic effects of decreased commerce. The subsequent campaign was a complete failure for France and almost ended Napoleon's Grande Armée. Motivated by this setback, Austria, Prussia, Sweden, and Russia established the Sixth Coalition and launched a fresh offensive against France. Following more equivocal battles, Napoleon was defeated at Leipzig in October 1813. While the Peninsular War extended to the nation's southwest, the Allies invaded France from the east. Napoleon was compelled to resign in April 1814 when coalition forces captured Paris at the end of March. The Bourbons regained their position of authority when he was banished to the island of Elba. However, in February 1815, Napoleon managed to flee and retake power in France for almost 100 days. He was banished to the island of St. Helena, where he passed away 6 years after the Allies organized the Seventh Coalition and defeated him at Waterloo in June 1815. Following Napoleon's crushing loss at the Battle of Waterloo and the Second Treaty of Paris in 1815, the Napoleonic Wars ended on November 20th, 1815. The Great French War, predating World War I, named the Great War, characterizes the unbroken fighting era between April 20th, 1792, and November 20th, 1815. Europe's frontiers were redrawn by the Congress of Vienna, which also brought about a brief era of relative calm. Significant historical effects of the conflicts included the growth of nationalism and liberalism, the formation of Latin American independence movements, the fall of the Spanish and European empires, and the ascent of Great Britain as the world's preeminent naval and economic force. The introduction of profoundly new tactics for fighting war, the major rearrangement of German and Italian provinces into larger states, and the civil law codification. There was a brief period of comparatively calm in continental Europe after the conclusion of the Napoleonic Wars, which lasted until the Crimean War in 1853. The Risorgimento movement, initiated by Napoleon Bonaparte in 1796, aimed to unite Italy by driving Sardinians and Austrians from northern and central Italy. This event led to an increase in nationalist beliefs in a single nation-state based on a monarchy, either constitutional or republican. European nations convened at the Congress of Vienna in 1814 to oppose Napoleon's destructive acts and stop revolutionary ideologies during the French Revolution. The First Italian War of Independence and the revolutions of 1848 gave rise to the Risorgimento movement. Nationalists like Giuseppe Mazzini founded the secret club Giovine Italia, also known as Young Italy, which inspired idealists, mostly young men, to fight for Italian independence. The people of the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies rose in January 1848 in opposition to King Ferdinand II, sparking the first wave of uprisings in favor of unification. The revolutions of 1848 sparked several uprisings throughout Europe, as citizens of France, Austria and Germany rebelled against their despotic rulers and sought democracy. The Expedition of the Thousand, spearheaded by Giuseppe Garibaldi, was one of the most ambitious initiatives of the Risorgimento. The Kingdom of Piedmont-Sardinia was created by combining Naples with the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies. In 1861, the Italian kingdom was formally established, with King Victor Emmanuel II as its head of state. The Austro-Prussian War allowed King Victor Emmanuel II to acquire Venice and the Papal States, leading to the Italian annexation of Venice and the Papal States during the Third War of Italian Independence. Italy's unification is connected to a larger liberal, nationalist, and democratic movement across Europe. After the failed revolutions of 1848, the movement redirected its attention to Piedmont, a northern state that successfully unified Italy. The Papal States were defeated, and the Italian peninsula was united under King Victor Emmanuel II of the House of Savoy due to the taking of Rome, also known as the Presa di Roma. This signaled the end of the Risorgimento, the unification process of Italy. As a result of this event, Rome was designated as the nation's capital. However, the newly elected Italian parliament still needed authority over Rome. King Victor Emmanuel II established the Kingdom of Italy on March 17, 1861, after subduing most of the Papal States during the Second Italian War of Independence. The Italian territory, including Venice, administered by Austria, and Rome, which remained a member of the Papal States, was excluded from this new kingdom. On March 27, 1861, the newly elected Italian parliament proclaimed Rome the nation's capital, even though it had no administrative authority over the city. In order to protect France, Napoleon III was forced to remove his troops from the city when the Franco-Prussian War broke out in 1870. The situation worsened when Napoleon was driven into exile after giving up at the Battle of Sedan in 1870. When the Prussians advanced on Paris, the fledgling French Republic's provisional administration lacked the resources and the will to defend the Pope's position. Pius IX convened the First Vatican Council as a consequence, upholding the primacy and infallibility of the Pope. In September 1870, King Victor Emmanuel II wrote Count Gustavo Ponza di San Martino a letter suggesting that the troops enter Rome peacefully and guaranteeing Pius's safety. Pius declined to accept the suggestion. A 50,000 Italian army moved closer to Rome, and on September 19th, they arrived at the city's Aurelian walls and besieged it. With the signing of the Act of Capitulation, Rome was turned over to the Italian troops, except for the Leonine city. The monument to King Victor Emmanuel II, made entirely of marble, is a significant historical landmark in the Eternal City. Born on March 14, 1820, in Turin, Italy, he was the last king of Sardinia and the first king of Italy. He was the son of Maria Theresa of Habsburg-Lorraine and Charles Albert I, the king of Piedmont-Sardinia. After his father's abdication, Victor Emmanuel became the legitimate king. Victor Emmanuel II united the kingdoms of Piedmont and Sardinia and went to war against the Austrians in 1848. He lost, but the following year, when his father abdicated, he was crowned king. Under his rule, the Kingdom of Piedmont grew to occupy almost all of Italy, leading to the unification of Italy in 1861. With Camillo Benso di Cavour as prime minister, he developed a parliamentary government, regulated finances, helped commerce and industry, and secularized ecclesiastical properties. One of his government's objectives was to reduce the power of the Catholic Church, forcing Pope Pius IX to take refuge in Vatican City. The unification of Italy occurred between 1861 and 1870, with the north led by Victor Emmanuel II and the south led by Giuseppe Garibaldi. In 1866, Italy lost battles against Austria, but obtained Veneto through an alliance with Prussia. After 2 unsuccessful marches on Rome, Italian forces took the city in 1870 due to French concern about a possible Franco-Prussian war. Venice was given to Piedmont after the Austro-Prussian War in 1866. The Kingdom of Italy is an extension of the Kingdom of Sardinia, a constitutional monarchy according to the letter of the Albertine Statute, fulfilled in Turin in 1848. The historical right governed from 1861 to 1876, addressing the country's problems, including poverty, financial issues, and territorial imbalances. The 20th century saw Rome grappling with world wars, the rise of fascism, and post-war recovery. Mussolini's shadow loomed large, and the city endured immense challenges and changes. Emerging from war's devastation, Rome rebuilt, transforming into a vibrant, modern metropolis. Italy initially remained neutral during the Great War, but several factions began to form. Benito Mussolini, a young man expelled from the Socialist Party for supporting military intervention, was one of the insistences on entering the fray. The First World War is considered the germ of the first nationalism in Italy, with nationalists and irredentisti advocating for Italy to confront Austria to complete national unity by conquering Trentino and Venice Giulia. Artists and intellectuals like Gabriele D'Annunzio, a poet and journalist, vehemently supported the cause. King Victor Emmanuel III, who favored participating in the intervention, finally achieved his objective by signing a pact in London, which secured the Austrian territories of Trentino, Alto Adige, and Trieste in the event of victory. On May 24, 1915, Italy entered the war against Austria, considered the last step in completing Italian unification. Many streets, parks, squares, and monuments remember the so-called heroes of the Great War, such as D'Annunzio or General Luigi Cadorna, commander of the Italian army. The Re di Puglia mausoleum in the Friuli-Venezia Giulia region is the largest sanctuary in Italy dedicated to the memory of the fallen, with over 100,000 soldiers buried. The most important monument in Rome is the Altar of the Fatherland, also known as the Monument to Victor Emmanuel II, or the Vittoriano, to celebrate the centenary of the start of the war and pay tribute to the more than 750,000 Italian dead. Various initiatives were planned, such as a large exhibition covering the causes and consequences of the conflict. Mussolini, born in 1883 in Italy, was a prominent figure in the country's history. He was a socialist journalist and socially awkward individual who initially faced trouble due to his intransigence and violence towards his classmates. After the 1914 war, Mussolini wanted Italy to join the conflict, leading to his break with the Italian Socialist Party. In response, he formed the Fasces of Revolutionary Action to encourage entry into the war. Mussolini believed society should be organized around a strong national identity rather than social class or political affiliation. After the war, many Italians were upset by the Treaty of Versailles, which they believed did not respect Italy by granting it too little land. Mussolini founded the Italian Combat Fasces, a paramilitary movement aimed at mobilizing war-hardened veterans to restore Italy's glory. However, the young party suffered a humiliating defeat in the parliamentary elections, and Mussolini began to court other groups opposed to the socialists, such as industrialists, merchants, rural landowners, and members of political parties. Mussolini's tough image helped build his reputation as a powerful and authoritarian leader. In 1922, he appointed 4 party leaders to lead his members to the country's capital, intending to intimidate the government into submission. In 1923, Mussolini saw an opportunity to seize power when the socialists announced a strike, highlighting the government's weakness and inability to govern. Mussolini increased his power while cutting back on civil rights and creating a propaganda police state. His imperial ambitions led Italy to occupy the Greek island of Corfu, invade Ethiopia, and ally with Nazi Germany, ultimately leading to the murder of 8,500 Italians in the Holocaust. Starting at the end of the 1980s, Italy underwent various structural and economic changes that greatly diminished its capacity for growth and development. However, a stable economic and political situation allowed for increasing levels of liberty and democracy, leading Italy to become increasingly European. The electoral laws of the early 1990s forced Italy to form coalition governments. This coalition government soon became established as a feature of a workable system of political compromise. Since then, political leaders have worked within this two-coalition system, resulting in the need for more votes in the Senate and House of Deputies to form a government. After years of fascist dictatorship, the liberation of Italy by the Allies provided the possibility of restoring democracy to the country and establishing a political and economic system in line with modern European standards. Elections held in 1948 established the Italian Republic, allowing many adult Italians to express their political preferences for the first time. The establishment of parliamentary democracy initially worked well, but an increasing number of political parties made the government increasingly unstable over time. Nonetheless, years of political turmoil provided an economic system that could modernize and give the country rapid economic development. From the 1960s until the 1980s, Italy was one of Europe's most dynamic and fast-growing economies, and the standard of living rapidly improved. Post-war Italy, in the aftermath of World War II, faced the daunting task of rebuilding its devastated nation. The process involved physical and economic recovery as well as significant social and political transformations. The reconstruction phase in post-war Italy involved massive economic challenges and rebuilding infrastructure severely damaged during the war. The country had to address the scarcity of resources, housing shortages, and the need to restore industries and transportation networks. Simultaneously, social and political changes were taking place as the war exposed the weaknesses of the previous regime and facilitated shifts in public sentiment. Underpinning Italy's reconstruction was the implementation of the Marshall Plan, a generous aid package provided by the United States to support the recovery of war-torn European countries. The Marshall Plan aimed to foster economic stability, combat the threat of communism, and promote peaceful international relations. Italy became a significant recipient of Marshall Plan funds, which played a crucial role in revitalizing the economy and modernizing industries. In parallel, Italy underwent a profound transformation from a monarchy to a republic. The monarchy, associated with the fascist regime of Benito Mussolini, faced growing discontent and criticism. Eventually, a referendum was held in 1946 to decide the fate of the monarchy, resulting in the establishment of the Italian Republic. The Republic's birth marked a significant departure from Italy's troubled past. The transition to a republic through the 1946 constitutional referendum had a lasting impact on post-war Italy. It represented a shift towards democratic principles, emphasizing the importance of popular sovereignty and individual rights. The Republic provided a foundation for political stability and allowed Italy to focus on rebuilding its economy, strengthening its institutions, and pursuing social progress. The Marshall Plan was vital in Italy's post-war development into a vibrant republic, altering its economic and political environment during this crucial reconstruction period. The plan's fundamental purpose was to aid European countries, particularly Italy, in their attempts to rebuild their economies and infrastructure that the war had badly destroyed. The plan sought to promote economic stability, revitalize industries, and increase people's living standards. Italy's implementation of the Marshall Plan was crucial in its post-war reconstruction and successful transition into a republic. The plan provided substantial financial assistance, totaling about $1.5 billion, accounting for approximately 6% of Italy's GDP. This financial support was pivotal in helping the country rebuild its infrastructure and stimulate economic growth. Infrastructure projects focused on constructing and improving roads, railways, and ports to enhance transportation and trade networks, essential for Italy's economic revitalization. The Marshall Plan's implementation also prioritized the revival of Italy's industrial sector, allocating funds for the modernization and expansion of factories, assisting small businesses, and supporting the development of key industries such as steel and coal. Agricultural reforms facilitated by the Marshall Plan aim to enhance productivity and improve food security. Trade benefits were achieved by removing trade barriers, promoting exports, and supporting trade relationships with other countries. Technological advancements were introduced to Italy, contributing to the modernization of various sectors. This involved providing technical expertise, training programs, and knowledge transfer, thereby boosting the competitiveness of Italian industries. Social benefits also had positive impacts in Italy, improving living conditions for Italians through the construction of housing projects, provision of healthcare services, and promotion of education and cultural exchange programs. The Marshall Plan was pivotal in Italy's post-war reconstruction and transition into a republic, addressing the country's economic challenges. The founding of the Italian Republic in 1946 constituted an important occasion in post-war Italy, signaling a rupture from the previous political system and creating a new form of administration. The 1946 referendum saw the Italian people choose between the monarchy and the establishment of a republic, with 54% of the votes in favor of the latter. This decision profoundly impacted post-war Italy, signifying a break from the past and laying the foundation for a new era of democracy and political stability. The establishment of the Italian Republic brought about several changes in the country's political landscape, including abolishing the monarchy and drafting a new constitution to define the rights and responsibilities of its citizens. This decision paved the way for Italy to rebuild and recover from the devastation of the war, setting the stage for its economic and social development in the years to come. The impact of the Republic on post-war Italy was significant, as it brought about positive changes and challenges. The establishment of the Italian Republic provided a stable political system and promoted democratic values, restoring faith in the government and creating a sense of unity among the Italian people. The Republic introduced social reforms aimed at improving the welfare of its citizens, such as establishing a public healthcare system and implementing labor laws to protect workers' rights. The Republic played a significant role in nurturing Italy's cultural and artistic development, supporting the promotion of Italian art, literature, and cinema, which enhanced the country's global reputation. Overall, the Republic had a profound and lasting impact on post-war Italy, shaping its future as a modern nation. We have reached the end of this video about the Eternal City of Rome. I hope you enjoyed it. If you wish, you can go and watch the other videos we have published. Feel free to leave criticisms, suggestions, and opinions in the comments.